Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we've got a really practical mission ahead of us.
We do.
We're basically cracking open the source material on, what is it, 7 major small talk topics?
That's right. 7 of the big ones in English.
Yeah, things like weekend plans, dining, jobs, pets,
Uh-huh.
the usual suspects.
All that stuff.
And the goal here is to, cut through all the information overload.
Mm-hmm.
Find those really useful conversational nuggets that help you sound, well, not just correct, but actually natural.
And that's so key, isn't it? Because we're not just talking vocabulary lists here. We're talking about, well, survival almost.
Survival, how so?
Well, our sources are pretty clear. The biggest hurdle for a lot of learners isn't just grammar rules, it's the speed.
Ah, the fast talk.
Exactly. It's all those reductions, the contractions native speakers use without thinking. It can make textbook English sound like a totally different language.
Right, and if you don't catch those sounds...
You miss the meaning
That-
completely. The conversation just flies past you.
Okay. Let's jump right in then with something high value. Our sources pinpointed one specific question. Actually, it's more like a 2-part phrase.
Mm.
They called it the most important conversation question of all time. Bit dramatic, maybe?
Huh? Maybe a little, but honestly, it kind of earns it.
Why? What's so
Yeah.
special about it? They say it's the thing to stop that horrible, awkward pause. We all know that feeling.
Oh, absolutely. And it earns that title because it solves the #1 fear for language learners.
Yeah.
The conversation just
I like that.
dying.
Right. Dead air.
Exactly. And the phrase, the strategy, is incredibly simple. It's just, what about you?
Or how about you?
Or how about you? Yep, same function.
That feels almost too simple. How can that little phrase be so powerful?
Think of it like tossing a ball back and forth.
Yeah.
Like a game of catch.
Okay.
Someone asks you something, right? What are you having for dinner? They've tossed you the ball.
Got it.
No, you have to answer, obviously. Oh, I'm having pizza, or not sure yet. But if you stop there,
The ball drops.
the ball drops. Conversation over. Awkward pause arrives. Bang. But if you just add, how about you? Or what about you? Boom. You've instantly tossed that ball right back.
Ah, so it shifts the focus off you.
Precisely. It keeps the interaction going. It's like conversational self-defense. You absolutely have to use it every time you answer a question, basically.
Okay, fundamental rule established. Toss the ball back. But like you said, you need to understand the question in the first place to even catch the ball.
Exactly. Which leads us straight into those mechanics of phase talk.
The reductions.
The reductions. The
Yeah.
sources make it super clear. Real spoken English often sounds way faster than the English in textbooks. And this is where people get lost.
Right, so let's break it down. Weekend plans, that's a classic small talk area.
It is. And a question like, what are you up to this weekend?
Yeah.
Very clear, very proper.
Almost never hear it like that, do you?
Almost never.
No.
Instead, you hear it compressed dramatically.
I hear that squished sound all the time. What's actually happening there?
Linguistically, it's like a spoken contraction. Some call it smushing. You're hearing, what are you, blend into one single sound.
Which sounds like,
Whatcha?
okay.
That sound comes from the T and what hitting the Y sound in you. They just kind of collide.
Wow, so it's a physical thing speakers do to be efficient.
It's a massive shortcut, yeah. Our brains optimize for speed. If you're listening for 3 distinct words, what are? You'll completely miss the one sound they actually make.
So it's not just mumbling, it's a real linguistic shift.
It absolutely is. And another huge one, especially in American English, is the flapped T.
The flapped T. Okay, explain that.
It happens when the letter T sits between vowel sounds in a word or phrase.
in?
Like in the word water. Most Americans don't say water with the sharp T.
Right? It sounds more like,
Water. That T flaps, it becomes a quick do sound.
okay, water,
Or city becomes city. Little becomes little.
city, little, got it. So how does this apply to questions, say, about dining?
Well, think about, what do you got going on? That T at the end of what? is between vowels when you say it fast.
Ah, so what a you becomes?
Or even softer, like what do ya? What do ya got going
What
on?
do you got going on? And notice you dropped the G on going there, too.
Good catch. Yeah, dropping the final G in being. Words going, doing, watching. That's another super common reduction in casual speech.
Wow, okay. So if you don't know about the flapped T and you hear water, you might be totally confused.
You could be. It's a fundamental shift in the sound.
Yeah.
And tying this back, if you missed the question, because it sounded like, what you up to, or maybe even want to eat out.
Wait, wanna eat out? Where did the do go?
Exactly. In really casual questions, the auxiliary verb do it can just vanish. You want to eat out becomes want to eat out.
Wanna eat out? Okay.
So if you miss that because you're expecting, do you want, then your perfectly practiced, how about you, is useless, right? You didn't even catch the initial question.
Makes total sense. Understand the sound, then toss the ball back. Okay, we've got the rhythm. Now let's add some vocabulary. Weekends often mean socializing.
Definitely. And the sources highlight some key terms here. Let's start with the meal that defines the weekend for many.
Brunch.
Brunch. It's not just breakfast plus lunch. It's a whole social event.
Right, it's got a vibe, usually later morning, like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Typically, yeah. And it implies leisure, taking your time, and often, let's be honest, involves drinks like mimosas or Bloody Marys.
Yes, the boozy brunch is a thing, and the people who love brunch and other weekend plans, they fall into types, right?
Two main types, according to the sources. First, you have the social butterfly.
Okay, picture that, flitting around.
Exactly. Someone who packs their weekend.
Yeah?
Multiple plans, lots of different groups of people, constantly moving from one event to the next.
Their calendar is jammed.
Totally. And then you have the opposite.
The one looking at the social butterflies calendar and feeling tired just reading it?
That's the homebody. Their comfort zone is literally home.
Staying in, cozy.
Prefers smaller groups or just being alone, doing things slowly. Recharge at home base.
Right. Let's test this. If I say I spent all weekend on the sofa, main activities were ordering food and watching an entire TV series.
Textbook homebody. And you were probably binge watching.
Binge watching, great term.
And
Where does that come from?
it's fascinating, actually. The sources point out it's borrowed directly from to binge drink.
Oh, wow. That idea of doing something to excess nonstop.
Exactly. But applied to consuming media, movies, TV shows, one after another, without stopping.
Makes sense. Very modern term. Now, if the homebody isn't binge watching, maybe they're being productive.
They might be catching up on some chores.
Catching up on chores, meaning
It's a really useful phrase. It means doing those necessary household tasks, laundry, cleaning, tidying that you've fallen behind on.
right, things you should have done earlier, but life got in the way.
Precisely. You're catching up to where you should be with them.
Okay, that covers the weekend nicely. Let's shift gears. Location and travel. Where people live, where they go, or maybe where they wish they could go.
Sure, describing where you live often falls into two broad categories. You're either in an urban area,
The city, busy, crowded, maybe concrete jungle vibes.
right, lots of people, buildings, not much nature, or you live in the country.
And the country specifically means countryside,
Right.
not just another country.
In this context, it means rural areas. Think nature, farms, forests, small towns, open spaces, away from the city buzz.
Got it. And when people from the city or the country travel, they usually want authentic experiences. They want to avoid
The tourist traps, yeah, those places that are overpriced and maybe not that great, just designed to grab tourist money.
So instead, you want to find something
You want to go off the beaten paths.
off the beaten path, literally off the main road where everyone else goes.
Exactly. It means finding those hidden gems, the local secrets, places most tourists miss. It implies a better, more authentic experience.
And what about things that are famous but actually are worth seeing?
Then you call it a must-see. Notice how it's used like a noun.
Oh, right. Like the Eiffel Tower is a must-see.
Perfect example.
Mm,
Or that museum exhibit is a real must-see. Essential travel vocab.
super useful. Now, sticking with travel, plans sometimes fall through, especially lately, right? Plans get complicated, canceled.
Very relevant, unfortunately.
Eh.
And there's specific language for talking about that disappointment or change of plans gracefully.
What structure should we know?
Two key ones. First, for contrasting a big dream with a more modest reality, often due to things like time or money.
Okay.
Use this structure. I'd like to ideal dream, but I think I'll reality instead.
I'd like to, but I think I'll instead. Give us an example.
I'd like to quit my job and travel the world for a year, but I think I'll just take a 2-week vacation instead.
Manages expectations nicely. Acknowledges the dream, states the reality.
Exactly. The second structure is for when a specific concrete plan got canceled or changed.
Okay, this was something that was actually going to happen.
Right. You use the past conditional. I was going to original plan, but I guess I'll new plan instead.
I was going to, but I guess
Yeah,
I'll do
right.
instead. Example.
The source is at a great one. I was going to backpack across Italy for a month, but I guess I'll stay home and learn how to cook Italian dishes instead.
Oh, that's good. Shows adaptability, maybe finding a silver lining. Very useful phrase.
Extremely useful for navigating those kinds of conversations.
Okay, powerful tools there. Let's wrap up with the last few topics. Birthdays, jobs, pets. We'll hit the highlights. Birthday etiquette first.
Right. Quick distinctions. A big party is often called a birthday bash.
Bash. Sounds energetic.
Yeah. Whereas a smaller, more low-key event is just a gathering or a get-together.
Gathering, get together, more intimate.
Exactly. And then, crucial acronyms you'll see on invites,
Ah, yes. RSVP.
which comes from the French. Répondez s'il vous plaît.
Meaning.
Please respond.
Mm-hmm.
Usually with a deadline. It's essential for the host to know numbers.
Got it. And the other big one, BYOB.
Bring your own beer, or booze, or bottle. Basically, bring your own alcohol.
Means the host isn't providing drinks, just maybe food in the space.
Correct. Don't show up empty-handed expecting free drinks if you see BYOB.
Good tip. Now, what's the absolute number one don't mess this up rule for adult birthdays in American culture?
Oh, this is critical.
Yeah.
After someone is, say, 21 years old, you generally do not ask, how old are you going to be? Or how old are you?
Really, it's considered rude.
Extremely rude or invasive for many adults. Age can be a sensitive topic. That question is really only okay for little kids, who are usually excited to tell you exactly how old they are.
Okay, huge cultural pointer there. Avoid the age question with adults.
Got it. Let's switch to jobs. Lots of loaded terms here.
Very loaded. First, distinguish your main job, often called your day job or your 9 to 5.
Which sometimes implies maybe it's not your passion.
Sometimes, yeah, it can carry that connotation, contrasted with maybe a dream job.
Right.
And then there's extra work you do.
Right, the side gig or side hustle. It's exactly something you do on the side for extra income, maybe exploring a passion. But the most crucial distinction is about losing your job.
Ah, laid off versus fired. Big difference.
Massive difference, socially and emotionally. Being laid off usually means it wasn't your fault.
Company reasons, right? Budget cuts, restructuring.
Exactly. It's about the company situation. Carries much less personal stigma.
But being fired.
That implies you did something wrong. Performance issues, breaking rules.
Precisely. It implies personal fault. So using the correct term is really important when discussing someone's situation or your own.
Understood. And when the job, whatever it is, just becomes too much, the pressure, the hours,
That's burnout.
burnout, like a candle burning out.
That's the metaphor. Your internal flame, your energy, your passion, your motivation for the job, it's just gone out. You're exhausted, overwhelmed, maybe cynical. Very common term these days.
Very relatable. Okay, final topic. Pets. What's the main thing to know?
The absolute number one rule, especially for cats and dogs belonging to you or someone you know, use pronouns he or she.
Not it.
Definitely not it. Using it sounds very distant, almost like you're talking about an object, not a beloved companion or family member.
That makes sense for furry mammals.
Yeah.
What about, say, if someone has a pet snake or a fish they really care about? Is it still awkward?
That's a good question. It kind of depends on the owner's relationship with the pet. If they've named the snake Slithers and talk about his personality,
Emotionally, it might feel a bit cold to the owner.
it could, yeah. Best bet if you're unsure is to use the pet's name. But for dogs and cats, definitely default to he or she. Mandatory, really.
Good rule. And two last quick pet terms.
If a pet came from an animal shelter, you say it's a rescue.
A rescue. Nice. Implies saving a life.
It does. And if a dog isn't one specific breed, but a mix of many,
A mutt.
a mutt, often said affectionately. Not purebred, but still a great dog.
Perfect. Wow. Okay. We covered a lot of ground there. 7 topics, reductions, the flap tate, social types, dealing with changed plans.
We really did a deep dive. Absolutely. From birthday bashes to burnout, I think the core message really comes back to flow, doesn't it?
It really does. Recognizing those fast speech reductions, understanding the vocabulary, sure,
Okay.
but most importantly, knowing how to keep the conversation moving.
Using that lifesaver question.
Using how about you or what about you religiously,
Yeah.
don't let that conversational ball drop. That's how you build confidence fast.
Couldn't agree more. That's the practical takeaway. Keep the flow going.
Mm.
Okay, so we talked about all the ways English speakers reduce questions, dropping R, dropping do, that tin turning into a D.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder. Here's a final thought for you to mull over until our next deep dive. With all these shortcuts and reductions, what single element of speech do you think is truly non-negotiable? What absolutely has to be there, clear as day, for communication to even happen?
Ooh, interesting question.
Something to think about. What can we absolutely not reduce or eliminate without completely breaking the meaning? Ponder that one, and we'll see you next time for the next deep dive.